known as Code U, because Code Kentucky didn't exist at the time that I worked there. And I got hired in April of 2020, so right at like the peak of the pandemic, and got to oversee the program and the whole pathways thing. My idea. So if you're liking that, you're welcome. And then really loved working with the Code Louisville Code U program. I'll try to call it what it's called now. And just had to move on for myriad reasons, mostly being a single mom, blah, 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 blah. So I went back into tech. I've worked in a lot of digital agencies working in e-commerce and different builds. I've worked with government clients. I've worked with Drew Barrymore. That was like my favorite client ever. And just doing a lot of really, really interesting things. One of my biggest clients, like actual size wise, I ever worked with in e-commerce was Rue 21, the store that's like in the mall that, you know, the hip kids buy their clothes at. I don't know. It's a little out of my age range, but they have some cute stuff, I guess. And, you know, just kind of trucking along and doing all sorts of stuff and doing all sorts of interesting things. One of my most favorite jobs was as a chief operations officer for a chaos engineering consultancy. And if you're wondering what chaos engineering is, hold that question. We're going to talk about it tonight. And I've come to talk to Code U before, and it was all about chaos engineering. So we're not going specifically into that as a practice tonight, but it is part of the DevOps family. And if you don't know what DevOps means, I'm going to tell you, and we're going to learn all about it. And at the end of my little presentation, we're going to go and do some interactive bits. And I want us all to like talk through a couple things. So be prepared to, I don't know, be talked to, be talked at. That's not what a presentation is anyways, but also prepared to talk to me at the end. I am asking that everyone holds questions for the end, because your question might be answered while we go through the presentation, but then I also have a cute little slide that has the Q&A on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this ready to go and share my screen and do all those fun things. All right, and this is my first time ever actually doing a presentation in Canva. So if anything goes wrong, just forgive me. All right. Multiple screens, multiple windows, share screen. Okay, so the screen is on my giant screen. Can you all see it okay? It looks okay in the window.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. I see all the thumbs up. Cool. All right. So again, hi everyone, I'm Violet, and I'm excited for you to be here with me today. We're going to talk about DevOps, chaos engineering, and yes, cake. I know that might sound strange, but hear me out. Before I worked in tech, I was a professional baker. I've also been a stand-up comedian and an actual clown. So I've spent a lot of times in environments where timing, teamwork, and recovering from disaster were just part of the day. And as it turns out, those skills come in handy when you're trying to keep a production environment from collapsing under pressure. So let's start with the basics. What is DevOps? DevOps is a set of practices that bring software development, the dev, and the IT operation, the ops, together. The goal is faster development, more reliable releases, and a culture where teams work together instead of in silos. It's not just about the tools, it's about the culture, the communication, and the automation. Think of it like a kitchen. Developers are your chefs. Ops are your servers, dishwashers, and restaurant managers. DevOps is the system that keeps the whole restaurant running smoothly. Everyone works together, and the food gets to the customer hot, on time, and not poisoned. Very important. So there's 4 basic fundamental foundational ingredients you can say, or core principles of DevOps. The first one is automation. You want to automate so that repetitive tasks, you want to automate repetitive tasks so that people can focus more on their important work like developing or engineering or coding or whatever they do. It's collaboration is number 2. You want to break down silos. You want to get devs, ops, QA, security, and product all on the same page. Next one is continuous integration, continuous delivery, which from here on out, because that's a lot of syllables to have to say, I'm going to refer to it as CI/CD, which is really CI/CD, but we're going to make it simple, CI/CD, which basically means you're going to ship smaller changes more often. And then there's observability, and that's knowing what's happening in your systems in real time. And these are the essential tools in your DevOps kitchen. They let you move fast without breaking everything in the process. So let's bring in our metaphor. DevOps is the cake base. You can decorate and deliver later, but if your base collapses, the whole thing is ruined. So think about it this way. Version control is your cake recipe. Your oven and your timers are your CI/CD. Your measuring cups are your infrastructure as code, and your oven light is your monitoring. The frosting on that cake is your collaboration and teamwork. And without that good base, you end up with a half-baked product and some very frustrated teammates. So once your foundation is solid, it's time to scale. But scaling is more than just making more than cake. It's also about consistency. You don't want 500 cupcakes that all taste slightly different or separate or different sizes or different textures. So you want to automate by using which would basically be your industrial mixer. Your conveyor belt to push out those 500 cupcakes are going to be your CI/CD. And your glass oven door is your observability, which makes it so you don't actually have to open your oven every 5 minutes and look and see if those cupcakes are done. Scaling means moving faster without cutting corners. So what happens without DevOps? You get manual deployments that fail. You get configuration drift and surprise outages. And more importantly, endless blame games between dev and ops. It's like baking a wedding cake with no recipe, no tools, and hoping that the frosting just holds it together. So now that your system is built and scaling, it's time to ask the big question, will it hold up? Chaos engineering is that structured practice of intentionally injecting failure into systems to see how they respond. It's like dropping your finished cake on the counter to make sure it doesn't collapse on the way to the party. So why chaos engineering? Because things always break. Always. With chaos engineering, it'll help you to find hidden single points of failure. It'll help you test fallback mechanisms. More importantly, build confidence in your systems and your teams. And when you're looking at integrating chaos engineering into your practice, you want to start small. You want to break things in staging. You want to learn what fails and why. So the foundational practices of chaos is start with a hypothesis. If this service fails, users won't know. So for example, if this service fails, users won't notice. So you run a small experiment. Kill one pod in staging. Add 500 milliseconds of latency. And then you observe. What happens? Did alerts fire? Did your failover work? And then you improve. You fix what failed, and then you try again. Think of it as a resilience workout. Break a little to build a lot. So there's different maturity levels when it comes to DevOps, and this one actually rounds back to if you're in your introductory level of Code U, or whether or not you're in your second class, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. You're probably in this beginner stage of DevOps where you're doing manual deployments via GitHub and there's no monitoring. You just kind of like push it, cross your fingers and hope it works. And if it's your first time using GitHub, it's probably not going to work, which is a good chaos test, because if GitHub doesn't work and you can't push your code, how are you going to be able to submit your project at the end of the term? So if you think about it in that way, that's kind of your introduction to DevOps, even if you're just building your first website. At the intermediate level, you have your continuous integration, your continuous delivery pipelines, and basic observability. So at least you have a little bit of automation going in, and you can see a couple little things. And GitHub Actions, for example, will allow this to happen. And then when you're at the advanced level, you have full automation, real-time dashboards, game days, which is a part of like crashing systems and then fixing them, and then chaos experiments. But the goal isn't perfection here, it's improvement. Just like we say continual integration with the CI could also be continual improvement. I don't know if you say that to a lot of people if they're going to catch the drift, but that's what I say. That's what Violet says. And if anybody gives you a problem about that, tell them Violet said so, and that should confuse them at the least. So tools that help and common tools that you might hear about. For version control, it's going to be things like GitHub and GitLab. Y'all are using GitHub at this level because, one, it's free and it's accessible, and it's not easy to use. But GitLab is something that is used a lot at the enterprise level, so that if you go into a company, and I can't think of any local companies that use GitLab, but I've worked for companies and will soon be working for companies that integrate with GitLab, because it has a lot more higher level controls and automation and things like that than GitHub does at the enterprise level anyways. But if you're just, messing around with your own apps and your own websites, GitHub's fine. For CI/CD, you're looking at Jenkins, GitHub Actions. Jenkins is actually free to download and to play with. You do have to have a cloud account. So I personally use Google Cloud. It costs me about $1.30 a month to keep it open. And Jenkins and another, actually 3 apps on here that I'm going to mention are deployed on it, and it's only cost me $1.30 a month. So if you wanted to mess around with these apps, you certainly could. They're all free. Jenkins, Terraform, and I believe Prometheus might be all open source, which makes them even better. So infrastructure as a code are going to be Terraform and Ansible. Terraform is what I run on my cloud instance. Terraform is free at the basic level anyways. And then observability is going to be Prometheus and Grafana. Prometheus you could get relatively easily and install it on your cloud instance. I think that if you are interested in actual backend development, that it might be a fun experience to actually host your own website on a cloud instance. I know that both AWS and Google Cloud offer students a lot of free credits to be able to use their platforms. There's no specific reason why I chose Google Cloud. I just am more familiar with Google. And when I first started with cloud, messing around with cloud, like let's say like 7 or 8 years ago, Google was the one that was giving the most certifications and lessons and credits for free. So I chose them, and that's just kind of what I stuck with. But I highly suggest you look into it because there's so many great resources. And if you're in the AI, Gemini is a fantastic resource to pair with Google Cloud, since they're both owned by the Google family. So if you don't know what you're doing, ask Gemini, and Gemini will walk you through the whole gosh darn thing. And then when it comes to chaos engineering, Chaos Monkey and Chaos Mesh are 2 apps that you can use. One of the other ones you could use is Gremlin, but I have inside information on Gremlin, and basically without violating an NDA, don't use it. I can't tell you why, but I can tell you, don't use it. Chaos Monkey is actually an app that was project that was put together by Netflix. Netflix was really the first real enterprise level company to pioneer the idea of chaos engineering. And so Chaos Monkey is what was born out of that project. And Chaos Mesh is another one that's similar to Chaos Monkey, but is also open source. So if you get that Google Cloud instance, you could try to run some of these apps on it as well, just to play with it and see what happens. And I know that if you put chaos engineering or at least some experience in playing with some of these tools on a resume, it's going to look really, really good.
Chaos theory.
Oh, my son wanted to add in chaos theory, but that's math, not development. So let's talk about two things every engineering team eventually has to care about: knowing what's happening and how much it costs. So your insight is your observability and your understanding. DevOps isn't just about moving fast, it's about moving smart. Observability gives you real-time visibility into your systems, but insight is what you do with it. It's not enough to see that something broke. You need to understand why it broke and how to prevent it next time. That's where metrics, tracing, and logs come in. And more importantly, how your team builds a culture of learning from incidents instead of just patching them. A good dashboard doesn't just report problems. It helps you ask better questions. And with your cost awareness, it's scaling without surprise builds. Like I said, with my Google Cloud instance, cost me about $1.30. But if I start running all sorts of things and doing a bunch of API hits and I have like 10,000 people hitting a website every hour, then obviously my costs are going to go up exponentially. So this is how you're able to fix that. Cloud bills can sneak up, especially when you're scaling fast. So DevOps practices are like such as infrastructure as a code or auto scaling and chaos testing help you understand and optimize usage rather than over provisioning just in case. So I'm going to take a time out and explain this real quick. So over provisioning just in case means that you have, let's say you're launching a brand new website and it's going to be a SaaS offering, software as a service. You're going to think at the beginning, we're going to have 1 million customers. Well, you're not. Okay. So what you want to do is maybe have like one server with one backup server somewhere on the one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast of the United States. What Google Cloud salesmen might tell you to do at the enterprise level is to have like 5 backups. But if you're not actually actively having people access the resources on these other 3 or potentially 4 servers, you're still paying for all the storage that's being supplied on them and for their actual usage, even if they're not really being hit by anything. So you're still paying for it. So it's completely spending money where you don't need to spend money. And you have to think about that when you're building out your infrastructure. If you're wanting to build like a web app or a SaaS offering or even a phone app, because that data has to be stored somewhere. And for the phone app to work, it's traditionally run on a cloud environment. And so auto scaling, just to define what that is and why it's better, is because if you know, let's take Prime Days on Amazon. If they have, let's say 5 people accessing your website every hour, which we know it's going to be a lot more than that, but I'm bad with numbers, so bear with me here. If we have 5 people accessing Amazon.com every hour, and we have Prime Days come up, well, all of a sudden we have 20 people accessing that website. We need to be able to have more servers because the servers can maybe handle 7 people. So what the auto scaling does is automatically bring in those extra servers. Instead of always having them there, they turn on and off depending on what the bandwidth and what the needs of the website are and what the traffic requirements are. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'll explain more when we get to the Q&A. Just hold the question and we'll get there, I promise. So chaos engineering in particular can surface expensive surprises like fallback services that work, but burn 3 times the compute when triggered, which could exponentially, once again, increase your bills. And you can't improve what you can't measure, and you can't scale what you can't afford. So connecting the dots means that through the insightful systems lead to smarter decisions. Cost-aware systems lead to sustainable growth. Together, they let your team spend less time firefighting and more time building things that matter. So now it's time for our interactive bit. I'm going to somehow figure out how to do multiple windows on a tiny 13-inch screen. And here we go. All right. So is everyone ready? I see some people. Okay. I only see one person, and she was saying no, and now she's saying yes, and now she's laughing because I think she knows that she's getting called out. Sorry about that. It's a small screen. So we're going to play a game. It's called Bake This, Not That. I'm going to describe a scenario, and y'all tell me if it's a baking success, which means it's good DevOps, or a cake disaster, which is tech debt in disguise. Feel free to shout it out, raise your hand. We can have a discussion. There's only Q&A left after this. We have actually 4 scenarios, 3 and a bonus question. And we have plenty of time. So let's talk, y'all. Let's spill some tech tea, I guess you can say. So in your first scenario, your team ships small changes to production daily. Your CI/CD pipelines are running. Alerts go to actual humans. Is this a success, or is this a disaster? This is an easy one, guys. All right. Questions, comments, answers? Okay. Hunter has raised a hand.
That sounds like a baking success to me.
Okay, it sounds like a success to you. And why does it sound like a success to you?
Well, I didn't. Nothing that you described in your scenario jumped out to me as like a red flag for like an issue.
Okay.
Yeah. Final answer. I'm sticking to it.
Yes is an answer. Does anyone else have any input, any ideas, any answers? I can't actually see you, so what I'm going to need you to do is to actually use the raised hand button if you want to participate.
Violet, can you read the scenario one more time?
I can. Your team ships, actually, I can cut. No, I can't. Okay, your team ships small changes to production daily. CI/CD, your continuous integration, continuous development pipelines are running. Alerts are going to actual humans. Is this a success or a disaster? Okay, so we've got an answer in chat, and we've got Justin raised their hand. Justin may answer the question.
Justin, I know you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you still. If you want to take a sec to sort that, Reed in the chat said emphasis on shipping small changes over large sounds much safer, which that stood out to me as well, Reed. That's what I was thinking.
Yep. Yep. And Reed also says that more changes can mean more potentially breaking changes. Unfortunately, yes. But yeah. Just, you have to remember one thing, I think, is that shit happens and it's going to break. So just be prepared. All right. And was it Justin that raised their hand that we couldn't hear?
I still cannot hear you, Justin.
You could put your answer in the chat box if you'd like. I've got that open.
Violet, I think the only other thing that stood out to me, and you may have said this, I may have been distracted feeding dinner to the little co-host here, but I was curious about the notifications, and Hunter just threw that in chat as well. Is that
Okay.
many notifications, or are they going to be inundated with notifications? That was the only thing that was making me think, is this a trick? Is this a cake disaster?
I mean, sure, notifications can be a disaster, and I've worked on websites for Blue Cross Blue Shield before, where we had multiple layers of observability and security built into them, mostly because of HIPAA policies that we had to adhere to, and different security requirements that we had certifications for, as well as PII, which is private information anyways, like names, addresses, places of work and stuff like that. So we had a lot of notifications, and some of them to ignore, and some of them not to ignore. So it just really ends up depends on how you have your alerts set up and what apps you're using to do the observing and how the notifications are coming in, that there are some of them that are just like, all is good, all is good, all is good, all is good, and to ignore those. But if something then crashes, you're going to get an alert that's like, things have crashed, and like all of a sudden capital letters and like swirling red sirens and stuff like that. So from your email box what the difference between the ones you could ignore and the ones you can't ignore are. I've also had to do it where we had to write weekly reports, so we wouldn't actually look at the alerts. And this was more for security than it was actual like observability, where we would have to try to see what like security fixes we need in the website, but we would only do that every Monday morning because a scan would run on the website. So there's some of them that are more on demand, some of them that are less, and you just kind of get to know what the sync in what the you get to know what the pattern is after a while, once you either integrate onto the team or you integrate those tools into your team. So back to Justin. Justin feels that this is a disaster. With everything changing daily, there is no consistency. Even with humans getting info, it may take too much time to sort what goes on. So that's an interesting answer. I'm going to say yes, but when we have these processes in place, especially with the CI/CD pipelines, we're not all merging our information into GitHub or GitLab at the same time. We're doing it through a pipeline, right? So it means that things are being done incrementally. And it's like, think about this, when you're mixing a cake, you're putting your liquids into a different bowl and you're putting your solids into a different bowl. So you don't add the eggs to the flour and then add the butter and then add the baking soda all to one, or the baking powder all to one bowl. You're adding your eggs, your milk, your melted butter, whatever that recipe calls for, your vanilla, whatever that's liquid. I bake with alcohol. That was my thing. My bakery is called Baking Under the Influence. We had partnerships with multiple breweries to make custom baked goods and stuff. I should do it again here, but I quite frankly don't want to. It's just too much work. It's just so much work. And I have other things to do with my life right now. We would put the beer and the butter and everything into one bowl, and then flour, baking powder, baking soda, whatever, salt into the other bowl, mix them up, and then you put them together. So it's kind of like that as a pipeline, where you take these pieces and you incrementally put them in and submit them, instead of just doing it kind of like all at once. Because that way it also makes sure that all the code is working with each other. And more importantly, when you're doing development like this on like an actual commercial offering in the professional realm, you have different kinds of websites you're going to be working on. You're going to have your development website, you're going to have your staging website, and then you're going to have what they call the production website, which is the one that's live to the people on the interwebs. So when you're doing these first changes and you're wanting to go through QA and you're doing your testing and everything, you're never doing that on production. You're always deploying to staging or development first. Development is usually, if you use development, you're usually using that for like bigger fixes. So if you're using like a CMS like Drupal, you're using that to test your Drupal upgrades and things like that, and making sure it works with everything else that you have going on the website. But staging is traditionally where you do your testing to make sure that those incremental bits of code aren't breaking other incremental bits of code down the line. And then when you know everything works, you then push that staging site to production, and then you have your new updated website. So with that in mind, here's the answer. All right, so the answer is it is a success. And it's a success because you've baked in automation, you've baked in observability, and you've baked in responsibility right into the process. Like a well-run bakery where everything's consistent, monitored, and on time. Because how awful would it be to go and get a cake for your kid's birthday party and it's not ready on time, and then you're late to your own kid's birthday party, right? Or your own birthday party, maybe the cake's for you, which I think is even worse, because I could always make an excuse for the kid, but I can't make an excuse for myself. All right, so scenario 2, this one's a fun one. It's 4:59 on a Friday. A developer pushes code with the commit message, final fixes for real v7. Success or disaster? Okay, I see a thumbs down. I'm going to guess that that's a disaster. Any other thoughts? Okay, I see another thumbs down.
I think anytime Friday release, yeah, put that. That's a pass for me.
Yeah, we don't have to go into discussion too much. The 4:59 on a Friday, or poor documentation. Yeah, definitely final fixes for real v7. There's gonna be a v8, I promise you, and that's gonna happen on Sunday when ultimately the final fixes on a Friday crashes everything, and the on-call team's gonna have to come in and fix it on Sunday, if not Saturday, or work all day Saturday into Saturday night, into Sunday morning, into Sunday, and the on-call team for Sunday has to come in, and they're the ones that ultimately fix it because those guys on Saturday couldn't do it. And guys is genderless, by the way. So yeah, this is definitely a disaster, and mostly because it's at 4:59 on a Friday. Like, rule 1 of like pushing things to prod is to never do it on a Friday. We never do deployments on a Friday. Like, that is like a cardinal sin across development, because people actually want to enjoy their weekends, not have to get called in. So we don't do that. We don't do that. So this is definitely a disaster. It's like trying to frost the 3-tier cake 5 minutes before the wedding starts, and the cake is still hot. If something goes wrong, no one's around to fix it. And let's be real, we all know that that's not the final fix. Has anyone seen something like this happen before? Have the experience of working in real, not real, I mean, everything is real, right? Because what is real? But we're not here to talk about real. Yes, CrowdStrike. Yeah.
I broke the Code Louisville website on a Thursday, which is pretty much our Friday.
Yeah.
This was back in like 2017. Brian was not all that happy with me. But
that was before
we got it working.
That was before you went to Squarespace. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So Squarespace is me, and not working on Fridays is me. So you're welcome. This is to everybody. I'm glad to see that that traces of me still linger in the program. It's it's soothing to my soul. All right, scenario 3. You've got beautiful dashboards, but no one looks at them until something is already broken. Success or disaster? What do we think? We got a disaster. We got some thumbs down. Another disaster. Thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down. All right. Anyone want to add anything to this? Want to contribute? No observability observed. Why was that so hard to say? And then Shannon says you have to use the tools available to you, right? So this is easy. This is going to be a disaster. It's like baking with the oven light on and the timer set, but never checking either. You know, when your timer goes off, or right about the timer goes off, if you're baking a cake or a cupcake or even corn muffins or anything, you want to take your little toothpick or your fork and dip it in it to make sure that there's still not batter on it. And that's how you tend to know that it's done. It's the same thing with like cooking a chicken. You want to put your meat thermometer in it, make sure it's at 165, and so you're not eating raw chicken, because who wants to do that? It's basically that. Dashboards are only helpful if they're part of your daily habits, not just background noise. And I kind of said something about that earlier when I was like, well, we know what ones to ignore and which ones not to ignore, but we still check them. Like every time that email comes in, we're still looking at the email. We're not just completely ignoring it. We're still reading the subject matter, knowing that everything's okay, and then we're moving on, right? We're not having to like actually digest everything that's in the email. The subject line told us everything's okay, and that's good enough. So here's our bonus question. Who here has actually set alerts before they who here has actually set alerts they act on before something crashes? Anyone? And it doesn't have to be with tech. It could be like,
I have an example.
Okay, Shannon, what's your
I
example?
have an alarm set for baby's ideal nap time that goes off so that I know about 10 minutes before she's about to crash.
Yes. I mean, it's the same thing. My son takes ADHD medications, and if he doesn't take them by 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to have some problems. So it's a chaos experiment. What happens if Adam doesn't take his ADHD medicine? All hell breaks loose. So we got to make sure he takes it on time, and he knows to take it on time too, because he doesn't like how he thinks and acts and behave when he doesn't take his medicine. So he's actually 13, so he's aware enough to be able to say, he's cognizant enough of his own behaviors to be like, I got to take my medicine. So, all right, actual bonus question now. Raise your hand if you've, or just answer with an emoji, whatever emoji you want. Surprise me. It doesn't have to be the thumbs up. Maybe a cake or a cupcake. I don't know, whatever. Croissant. Give me the emoji of your favorite baked good. If you've ever run a chaos experiment on purpose, and I don't mean something broke and you called it observability, I mean you actually did a planned test. And it could be about anything. So use your imagination.
I just wanted to pipe in and say, I don't want you to be disappointed if you don't see any croissants, but there's only like 8 emojis that they give us.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Okay, Reed gave me a thumbs up. So Reed has tried. Shannon is thinking. Kelly has said thumbs up. We got some more thinking faces. All right, so those of you who have answered thumb up, does anyone want to share what their chaos experiment was that you ran in any aspect of your life? You could do it in chat. You could unmute yourself. Whatever you prefer. Yes, Hunter says that making music and art projects requires a lot of experimentation. That is absolutely true. And sometimes you have to try things to fail. And especially like thinking about like mixed modes in art, right? If you're going to use like crayon and oil paint, are the crayon and the oil paint going to go together? Are they going to break? You just have to try it and see if it works, and then fix it if it doesn't. Reed says, working with the web analytics platform for my company, I thought that certain data were not being tracked for mobile users. I tested it out and it turned out I was right, and then I had to fix it with a fair amount of custom JavaScript. Sounds about right. But you had that intuition. You had that hypothesis. Okay, so it worked. Kelly is a great one. I bake and I've tried gluten-free and egg-free cupcakes. Yuck. I have done gluten-free and egg-free cupcakes and had them done really well. I'll give you my contact information at the end and I'll pick my brain and figure out what I actually did to make them really good. But I got you, girl. If anyone needs tips on baking, just holler at me. Or DevOps or chaos or general nonsense. Yeah, that is a chaos experiment. All right, so now to everyone's favorite section, Q&A. Anyone have any questions for me?
Violet,
Yes.
as you know, so CodeU students, and I'm sure the folks you worked with when you were at Code Louisville, have a lot of different interests, a lot of different career paths.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about what might draw somebody to DevOps versus being a developer or being a business analyst or anything else that might kind of be an option for them?
Yeah, so I could kind of break it down. DevOps is, how do I explain this? Is a person that likes to ask questions, but maybe not likes to ask questions, likes to do a lot of research, but not a lot of research, not like you're, going to write a new AI or LLM or something. But it's someone who likes to think about problems, analyze problems, and then learn how to fix those problems and also think about how to break those problems. So it's a real good position for somebody who's kind of like a jack of all trades and who doesn't want to necessarily code all day. It's good for someone who wants to be a helper. It's good for someone who likes to talk a lot and likes to work in a collaborative environment. And kind of is geeky and likes the actual analytics side of it. Like observability is looking at a lot of dashboards, figuring out what they mean, how that data correlates with each other, building dashboards with different aspects of data, to seeing how it all works. Predictive analysis can come into it when you're talking about, web traffic and things like that. For example, DevOps could go in a lot of different directions and a lot of different companies and can actually integrate DevOps. Like you won't see it in a marketing agency, like a web development agency. Like I've worked for like Shopify Plus agencies in New York City, and we don't do DevOps at all because Shopify is like its own CMS. And you'll probably see that a little bit with like WordPress WordPress agencies and Squarespace agencies, because a lot of it's so like, I don't know, small, especially with the like Squarespace and Shopify are like intrinsically built. They're like a SaaS in itself. So you don't actually have to deploy stuff. I mean, you can deploy stuff, but you're not doing that regularly like you did with the custom-based website or even like talking CMS is like a Drupal-based website. But I'm currently interviewing for a job that I actually got through a CodeU contact. One of the mentors reached out to me and was like, hey, Violet, come work for us. And I'm like, cool. But what's really interesting about this is that it sits at the intersection of space technology with satellites and quantum computing. So and it's solely on the DevOps team, acting as a project manager. So there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different paths that you could take this on. If you have interest in finance, for example, there's a lot of opportunity for DevOps in financial companies like hedge funds, because they need to have continuous deployment, for example, on their data systems that keep them available to like buy and sell stocks and have up-to-date information on how the stocks are trending. So there's getting into a hedge fund, by the way, is very, very lucrative. Like you could easily make like a normal DevOps person might make around like 140 to 150. You get in with a hedge fund and you'd be making like 250 to 300. So that could be a goal for somebody one day if you care about things like money. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say somebody who's very inquisitive, somebody who likes to ask questions, which is inquisitive, and somebody who likes to figure out problems, somebody who likes to break things, somebody who likes to fix things, and somebody who really can act really well and handle working under pressure. And I would say more importantly, somebody who's really good at shifting directions really fast. Because if something breaks, you can't just go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I say that as a neurodivergent person. I know what that's like in my everyday practice, but you have to be able to switch your priorities really good. So if you're not good at that, DevOps is not where you want to be. Hands down. Full stop. Okay. Any other questions? Got my eye on the chat. Got my eye on just Hunter, actually, but
I have a question about DevOps.
Sure.
So is there a lot of overlap with like, are these kind of project management sort of positions a lot of the time?
Not necessarily, because there's a lot of technical aspect that goes into DevOps, especially when it comes to like working in the cloud. So you have to be able to do, you have to be able to know, Bash, for example, that's used a lot. And I don't know if Code U specifically teaches a lot in Bash. I think Pluralsight might have some of the introductory videos because you are using the terminal to access GitHub. At least that's what I remember. But that was a couple years ago. Yeah, so there is still coding involved. Now, some teams do have project managers, and a project management could go a couple different ways with DevOps. It should ideally be, there's a couple different ways to define project management in the technical space, being like waterfall, agile are basically the two main ones. And then you have ones that break down into it, but they basically qualify in those two things. DevOps excuse me, DevOps ideally should be informed by the agile project management theory, because it's always constantly improving and constantly moving, whereas waterfall is like building a house, right? You have to start at the bottom and work your way up to the top, and you're like, it's done. But agile is like starting with the plumbing and then doing the roof and then building the foundation. You kind of like put all these different pieces together and you continuously improve until you get to your version of the project that you're looking at, whatever your roadmap says. So the project manager can kind of work in a couple different ways. And I think it really depends on how the organization really defines how they manage their projects, whether it's more waterfall or agile. If it's more waterfall, you probably don't really have much of a project manager, but there's plenty of DevOps teams that don't have project managers and plenty of them that do. So it's really up to every company to decide themselves, but the opportunity is definitely there.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask another question?
Oh, sure. I want to add to that. If you wanted to do project management and if you want to do project management within the realm of DevOps, you could always try to hone your skills and get in with like one of the observability companies and go work for like Terraform.
So could you elaborate a little bit on, and I'm sorry if I just missed, if you explained this and I just missed it, but can you elaborate on what it might look like for someone in DevOps to be changing gears or changing tracks, like on short notice? Like, are you talking about coordinating with different teams or like touching different parts of the development process, or?
It's a little bit of everything. And it's really going to depend once again on like what you're building. So for example, with the space job, right? So again, I can't talk too much about it because of, those wonderful things called NDAs. But for example, they work with satellite reconnaissance. So if they're in the middle of tracking a flood and watching the water the water levels rise and the satellite goes down, lives are potentially at risk, right? Because the flooding waters could, like, just like what we saw in Texas a little while ago. And my first career, actually, even before baking, was in emergency management. So this is a lot of that. It plays a lot into why I do what I do now, because I like to fix things when they break. And I have that mentality to get in and like focus and like get it done. But when I'm not hyper focused on getting something done, I'm like a complete space cadet. So this is how my neurodivergency works for me. But what would necessarily happen, to go back to your question, is that if that satellite goes down while it's in the middle of monitoring the flood, people can die. So it's up to the team. You might be like working on an update to a different satellite's system, and all of a sudden, boom, a satellite goes down. You have to immediately switch pace to think about what we're going to do to get the satellite up and running again.
Okay.
Right. And that when things go down, a lot of things could go down after that. So you just have to be prepared at all times, kind of like a
So are
like
they're
fireman,
often
right?
like the point people for like development crises?
Right. So like,
Okay.
if like Amazon goes down, someone might call the help center. You're not the help center. Or like Spectrum, we'll say Spectrum because they
Mhm.
actually have a help center. And I know they're always trying to poach
I
students,
used
but
to work for that help center. Yeah,
huh?
I know very well. I used to
Yeah,
work for that help center. I know.
there you go. There you go. They like to employ the code use students. We had a lot of people try to come get poached by them. But anyways, if someone's internet goes down, they call the text help, and the text help says, okay, well, let's see what we can do. They put you on hold, they put in their little thing, and then there's another person down the line who's like, okay, we have to like reset the node, or maybe we have to go put the wire back up. But there's always like an engineer there that's figuring out what is actually happens, and that engineer could be handling 10 different outages at the same time. Or if, like, let's say the outage just comes because there was a really bad windstorm, which has happened. I live in Bullitt County and I don't have Spectrum. I have a company called Broadlink, and every time it rains, we basically lose internet service. So I know that they're constantly busy trying to find what the source of those problems are. And usually it's limbs falling on the lines and taking the lines out. Yay, Jefferson Memorial Forest. But so they always have to be alerted. So someone who's on call then always has to be ready to like change what they're doing. And if you're on call on a Saturday, you could be like hanging out cooking dinner. I don't know, maybe you're like out back grilling some chicken, and then all of a sudden your pager goes off. You got to have someone else take care of that chicken, so you go put that satellite back up so that lives aren't lost, right? It's that kind of thing. It's, you might be in the middle of taking your laundry out of the dryer, and the laundry
So it
sits
seems
in the
like
dryer
a
for an
bit
extra
more
day.
urgency than like your average IT support ticket.
Yeah, but it really depends on how, because even if it's like banking is incredibly important, e-commerce isn't important, but the e-commerce companies are going to tell you it's important. Route 21 cares of whether or not their website goes down,
Mhm.
especially like
Well,
right
yeah,
now when it's
yeah.
back to
It's all
school.
relative.
And Christmas are their two biggest seasons. So if their website goes down, on August 4th, when the kids go back to school, you bet your ass it's going to be an emergency, even though if it's not an emergency in the grand context of things, right? People aren't going to die, but there's going to be substantial problems to the business's bottom line. So you have to be able to contextually shift like that.
Yeah, operational emergencies for
Yeah.
whoever you're working with. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Pilot.
Yep. And like I said, shit happens. Accidents happen. People break their arms every day. So, and then I, as a project manager, remember that too. And then when it comes to working with my team and doing like resourcing and stuff like that, always have to remember that eventually someone's going to get the flu, and we have to be accountable for that, because if someone gets the flu while they're on their on-call rotation, we're not going to call them in. We're going to have to find someone else. So it takes it just is always like, if you are a person that has a lot of like circular thinking about doomsday, you'd be great for this role. Any other questions? Okay. All right,
Awesome.
so I have one more slide. I have closing thoughts, right? So DevOps isn't about being perfect. It's about building a strong foundation that you could grow on. Chaos engineering helps you know your systems will hold up even when things get weird. So thank you for baking with me today. Stay curious, stay resilient, and don't forget to monitor your cake. And you can reach me at very easy email address, violet.odes@gmail.com. That's it. That's me. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Violet Olds. And if you want to know how to get to that, just type in linkedin.com/members/in/Violet Olds. I'm very, very good with my branding. My website is hireviolet.com. Feel free to use that in your adventures. All right. Any other things before we close out for the night? I'll give it back to Shannon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Violet, for being here. That was great.
Thank you.
I know I learned a lot.
Good, I hope. I hope everyone learned a lot. Especially for a Monday night. Like, who likes Mondays? Like,
Exactly.
Garfield was right. You got a case of the Mondays, but not me. I'm good.
I do want some cake now, so I'm gonna have to go figure that out for myself.
Yeah, I don't have any cake, and I could go bake it, but unfortunately, I have to cook dinner first.
Yeah. Yes, same. Well, thank you so much. We will be back in 2 weeks with a presentation on cybersecurity. So keep an eye